Good Chanukah. The Rebbe began the Farbrengen this afternoon that today is Shabbos Mevorchim, and it is the Shabbos Mevorchim of the month of Teves. In general, every Shabbos Mevorchim is something very outstanding, and this is why the Frierdiker Rebbe was the one who introduced the idea to have a Hasidische Farbrengen on every Shabbos Mevorchim. But how much more so is it in this Shabbos Mevorchim of the month of Teves? Because the Rosh Chodesh Teves will always fall out during Hanukkah. Now that we have a set calendar, it is definitely on a set day, in always during the Yontif of Hanukkah. Even in the times when they were Mekadesh al Pi Hariyah, when they waited for two new witnesses to come and say that they saw the new moon, so it could have been postponed within a day or two, but as long as it was still postponed, it still would have come out, it still had to come out to be during the Yontif of Hanukkah. So if we are saying that Shabbos Mevorchim Teves, we bench a Rosh Chodesh, which is not an ordinary Rosh Chodesh, it's a Rosh Chodesh which is combined together with Hanukkah, so the Shabbos Mevorchim is also a special Shabbos Mevorchim. Why? Because this Shabbos gives strength to the Rosh Chodesh. So if this Shabbos gives strength normally to an ordinary Rosh Chodesh, now that we're talking about a special type of Rosh Chodesh, a Rosh Chodesh that comes out combined with Hanukkah. So we must say that the Shabbos that gives strength to this Rosh Chodesh has to have extraordinary koiches within the Shabbos, because the Shabbos has to give bracha and koiches to a special type of a Rosh Chodesh, which is a Rosh Chodesh which falls out combined together with Hanukkah. The Negei Hanukkah, the Rebbe goes on, we find that Chazal used the expression Haneros halalu einon betelim lo'olam, that these candles of Hanukkah will never cease, something eternal. Originally, the Neis Hanukkah comes as a result of Neres Hamikdash. The Chazal promises that the Yontif of Hanukkah will be such that Haneros halalu einon betelim lo'olam. We find this expression, we find the Negei, the two Yomim Tovim which are mit HaRabbanon, the Yontif of Hanukkah, as well as the Negei of Purim, we also find it. We find this specialty, the Negei of these Yomim Tovim, that Chazal used the expression einon betelim lo'olam. It is something which will remain eternally. So the Rebbe is explaining that the idea of Rosh Chodesh is something which is changeable. In other words, the mere fact that we're saying it's a Rosh Chodesh, it's a new moon, this in itself shows that it's a month past and we're going into a new moon. So this is something which is completely contradictory to the idea of Hanukkah. Hanukkah is something which stresses eternity. It stresses the idea of Haneros halalu einon betelim lo'olam, the concept of this will remain this way constantly, lo'olam v'od. However, when we are talking the Negeya, Rosh Chodesh is something which constantly keeps on changing. So here the Rebbe says, here we see a remarkable thing, how two haftochim, two things which are contradictory one to another, with the koyach of Torah, it gets combined, and here we can have that in the Yontif of Hanukkah we will have Rosh Chodesh. This applies the Negei to Rosh Chodesh Teves, regardless, whatever the key is. This year we have a special key in the Yontif of Hanukkah. And the specialty this year with the Yontif of Hanukkah is that Hanukkah begins with Shabbos and ends with a Shabbos. And this is something which we do not have it every year, but this year we do, that the opening and the closing of Hanukkah, in other words, the Haskalah and the Siyam come with Shabbos. What's the idea of Shabbos? Shabbos is menucha, peace. Chazal tell us, bo Shabbos, bo menucha. It comes Shabbos, automatically you enter into a mood of peace. And when we're talking menucha, the Rebbe says, within this level of menucha, there are various madregas. Because we know that Chazal tell us that the Shabbos is divided into three categories. There's a category of Friday night, there's a category of Shabbos by day, and the highest pedestal of the Shabbos is the level of Raiva de Raiva. That's the time of Shalosh. So we must say that the level of Menucha of Shabbos is a yet higher Madrega, as the Madregas in Shabbos keep on going higher.
automatically calls for that the Madregas in Menucha also rise. So when we are talking about the highest level of Shabbos, which is the time as the Zohar refers to as Raiva, the Raiden, the Zman of Mincha, the Zman of Salashudis of Shabbos, that time of Shabbos is as well the highest level of Menucha Shabbos. Menucha is the same idea as Solace, as peace. The Rebbe says we can find, in Chassidus it's explained, based on previous Svarim, the expression Shabbos Solace. That the idea of Shabbos brings with it Solace, peace, which in one way is expressed in the word Solace, and in a yet deeper way is expressed in the thought of Menucha, which is also an idea of peace. This is what the Rebbe was Mekasher to what he spoke Yutes Kislev. Yutes Kislev, it's customary for Yutes Kislev Farbrengen to make a siyum on the Shas. Because Shas is divided in every Yutes Kislev Farbrengen, and everybody participates by learning the Masechta. So after Farbrengen, usually, this is the custom. Previous years used to be done on Chavdalah Tevis, 24 days in the month of Tevis, which is the Yosef of the Alter Rebbe. So the Rebbe will begin time, in his early years of leadership, changed it that it should be done in the Yutes Kislev of the Farbrengen. So everything, always Yutes Kislev, the Rebbe makes is siyum on Shas. So as well, in this Farbrengen, the Rebbe did the same this past Sunday night. And the Rebbe stressed Sunday night, stressed it very much today as well, that when we make a siyum on a Masechta, or as well when we make a siyum on Shas, it does not mean we just finish and that is where we remain. Here the Rebbe quoted in Simchas Torah, when we say the introduction to Chassan Bereishis, the person who was called for the reading of the new Torah, of the new cycle, the new beginning of the Torah. In other words, we have just completed the Vayeshev Bracha, and we are beginning Chassan Bereishis. So in the Rishus, which is like a lengthy introduction, there's an expression, Maskitin Haskola Lahasmona. That what we should do is tie together the end to the beginning. In other words, whenever we complete in Torah, we automatically begin a new one in Torah right away again. So if you consider this as an appropriate time to make a siyum on Shas, it automatically stays there as a reminder that we cannot satisfy ourselves with the fact that we are finished Shas, we automatically have to begin a new cycle of Shas again. And the same applies to any type of siyum on the Masechta, any type of a conclusion in any limud. What do we find? What did the Chazal finish Masechta Shas with? Masechta Nida, which is the last Masechta of the Shas. So the Gemara concludes with Tana Devei Eliyahu. Kol Hasheina halachis b'chol yom. Anyone who learns halachas daily, muftach lo to ben olam haba. He is guaranteed to be a ben olam haba. And the Gemara quotes the pasuk, "Shenema halichos olam loy, al titzi halichos ela halachos." Don't just use the word halichos. The word to be read halachos also means that anyone who learns halachas on a daily basis is guaranteed to be a ben olam haba. These are the last words of Chazal in the Masechta Nida, which is the siyum of Shas. Tosfos, at the very end of Shas, tells us that there are some svarim that are not goyreshes at the very conclusion of the Shas. However, Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, as the Rebbe stressed today, that Rabbeinu Tam was a direct grandson of Rashi, and he took over, he was from the main authors of the Tosfos. He was a grandson from Rashi through his daughter. In other words, Rashi's daughter was Rabbeinu Tam's mother. It's like he finds in the day that Tzemach Tzedek, who was the grandson of the Alter Rebbe, the same way. It was the Alter Rebbe's daughter, Rebbe Tzedek Leah, who was the mother of the Tzemach Tzedek. And as the Rebbe explains, refers to a Pischam, to a saying, the Chassidim, that this is the closest way of a grandson is when it goes to the son of the daughter. So the Rabbeinu Tam was the son of the daughter of Rashi. So Rashi, as well as the Rabbeinu Tam, they do claim that this has to be at the end of Shas, this quotation. The Chaim and Tosfos goes on saying that it's very appropriate that this should be the finish of Shas. Why? L'sayim the dover toy. That starts to finish with something good. So again we see the same thought. That Chazal, the Tosfos, is one of the main authorities. The Rabbi Natan tell us that how is the most appropriate way for the conclusion of the entire task to finish with something good. And what's good? To tell us that one who learns halachas every day is a ben olam haba. Then Tosfos goes on. The same Martina the Nevi'im are saying. We find the same thing in the Nevi'im as well. The sign the Israel, they have concluded their work to divrei vak v'tanchumim. They have concluded their words with words of praise, that's what Strach means, and tanchumim means words of condolence. So, if you notice, this is already something. First place it says that Strach finishes with something close. Here case is close to a yet higher madrega, not some case. Words of Strach and tanchumim. Rabbi explains, this is Rabbi tied it into a purpose. Is a purpose, Zehavayi Yagia Chosti. Hashem is making lifted my darkness. And this is how the Rebbe explains the concept of why Hanukkah. Neres Hanukkah, Chazal refers to Hanukkah that Haneres Halalu Einem Betelem Lo'elam, it is something which will remain eternally. The Rebbe explained what can destroy a Neir. What can destroy a Neir is darkness. However, the color of Neir Hanukkah is that Neir Hanukkah is so powerful that the darkness around the Neir Hanukkah has turned to light. So there's nothing that can take away the Neir Hanukkah anymore. That the Neir Hanukkah should disappear, for example, because normally what can take away lichtigkeit? It is choshech. The Neir of Hanukkah is so powerful that it took the choshech around it and converted it to light. This is what Rebbe translates throughout the Farbrengen, what the Gemara tells us, the Neder of Hanukkah, that the whole idea of Hanukkah is Chaya Rigla de Talmudoi. Gemara says, what do we do with the Neder Hanukkah? Gemara Shabbos. We take the Hanukkah list and we put it out Pesach face in the Bachut, on our outside door. The Gemara asks, how long is the time that the Neder Hanukkah, when is the appropriate time to light Hanukkah? Licht. The Gemara uses the expression, it's a Tifka HaChama, from sunset, ad the Chaya Rigla de Talmudoi. It's an Aramaic term, which means Talmudoi, in front of our South learned that, were a tribe of people who were late walkers in the street. So, what is the pshat in the Gemara is, what is the latest time that we are still permitted to sing on Hanukkah list as long as there are still people walking in the street? Hasidus type this. Talmudoi is spelled Tofrei Mem Vav Dalet. If we were to take the letters of Talmud and jiggle them around, we have the same word as a moirei, one who rebels. So what Hasidus type is, what is the whole idea of Hanukkah? Chaya Rigla de Talmudoi, to take the one who is still considered a moirei, who is still considered one who is apparently still rebelling as far as Jesus Christ, as far as the lichtigkeit of Hanukkah, and to take this whole concept that this should completely disappear. So this is what the whole thought of Hanukkah is. So that is why Hanukkah must be something eternal. If Hanukkah is so powerful that no darkness can make the Neir Hanukkah, can blow out the Neir Hanukkah, the Neir Hanukkah will remain there eternally. So this is the idea of Neir Hanukkah. That Hanukkah brings lichtigkeit all over. And maybe the same that Rebbe says is the Neder Torah in general. The whole idea of Shabbos, that Shabbos complete the divrei svach v'tanchumim. Normally there's an union of l'chaim b'dover Torah. That's one level. However, when we're talking svach v'tanchumim, that's a yet higher madrega. This is compared to the madrega that originally there was something unsatisfactory, there was darkness, and here we say that there's a concept of tanchumim, condolence, we are overcoming this darkness, we are bringing light within the darkness, which is the same idea of Neir Hanukkah. So when one completes Torah, this is what the whole idea of a Siyam HaShas stands for. It's also the same idea. Shas finishes with the concept of Kol Hashem HaHalachos B'chol Yom. It guarantees that he's a Ben Olam Haba. And here the Rebbe brought out later in the Farbrengen, we know that there's the Babylonian Shas and there's the Yerushalmi Shas. Normally we find differences between Talmud Babli and Talmud Yerushalmi. However, here the Rebbe stresses Talmud Yerushalmi concludes with the very same idea of Kol HaSheina Halachis B'chol Yom Muftach Lo Yisben Olam Haba. So we see that this is a united idea from Babli as well as from Yerushalmi to conclude the Shas to give a Svach B'Tanchumen. And when we talk to Svach B'Tanchumen, it's a yet higher Madrege than Pei. This is the level which the whole idea of Hanukkah applies to it. It's the idea of Kaya Rivla the Talmudai, to take darkness and make the darkness disappear and bring total light. And this is the idea of Ner Hanukkah, the Ner, which is the Ner Mitzvah, the Torah Mitzvahs are compared to light and to a candle, and to bring this light into the darkest part of the world. Which this is the idea of Hanukkah, as well as the idea of the Siyum HaShas. Customary, when the Rebbe is always Messiah in the Masechta, he always ties together the end of the Masechta to the beginning of the Masechta. Now that we are Messiah in Shas, the Rebbe was Makaber the end of Shas as well as to the beginning of Shas. How does Shas begin? Me'en Messiah Koyren Esma Be'ai. The Rebbe brought two very outstanding Pirushim here to negate the beginning of this night. Normally, what's the pshat me'enes ha'koyren esma? We learn Pasuk pshat. Listen, from what time can one read even esma? However, we know that every word in pshat is extremely accurate. Every word from the Chachamim in Mishnah. Why is it that the Chachamim has chosen this expression of me'enes rather than any other expression? From one, it is to be expressed in many other words in music. So we see that Chazarah has chosen to use the word me'enes ha'koyren esma. From when on can we recite Shema in the evening? So there's a Hasidic type. Me'enes not only means from when on, me'enes has another meaning. Me'enes means fear. Ema. Ema in Hebrew means fear. Here the Mishnah tells us, that brings a person to the proper level of reading Shema, me'enes, when he has proper fear for Hashem, when he has ema for the Rebbe, for the one who we are saying Shema to, this brings about, this arises within a person a proper mood to be able to read Shema accordingly. Here the Rebbe refers to another type, the Ma'arit Chani, the Ma'arit, who was a Rishon. And he asked, how does, if you look carefully, you will notice that all of the Sutra Sidra and Mishnah are divided accordingly. Meir discusses in Yanim of Yevim Peidim, Nezikin discusses in Yanim of Nezikin, Chazikim in Yanim of Karbonos, and so forth. How is it, what Shaifa is the Brachas? How would all the other Yanim which are discussed in the Masechta Yisrael? If you look further in the Masechta Yisrael, that's discussed, all the Dunim must tighten from Manitani, Smita, Klayim, all these Dunim that obviously we do not see what is the Shaifa between all the Yanim, the Zadi, the Yisrael. That Shaifa is this hard, what is the relation to the idea of Me'enes ha'koyren esma in the Shaifa? So the Ma'arit Chani type, here that the Pasuk tells us, Vayeshev Chachma Yiras Hashem. That is the first thing of wisdom, that is the first thing of Chachma. First step in Chachma Yiras Hashem, to him to do that thing. So that is why, as a major introduction to all of Mishnah, regardless of all the various Yemen and Torah which are discussed in the Sutra Sidra Mishnah and all the parts of Mishnah. What is the main introduction? Vayeshev Chachma Yiras Hashem. The first thing one should know that he got there. And therefore, one has to be properly got there. How does this come about? Through the mitzvah of Mishnah. That is why the Chazarah is chosen to open Mishnayos with the mitzvah me'enes ha'koyren esma ba'ad, and when are we allowed to recite Shema every evening? Because this is not just something, there are many mitzvahs which we perform daily. However, this is something completely basic. This is something which tells us the idea of Yiras Hashem. The whole idea of acceptance of the yoke of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kabbalah Tel Malchus Shamayim. So that is why Chazal has seen it appropriate that this should come as an introduction this would be the very first of mitzvahs. Throughout the Sichos, first the Sichos, to learn the Sichos, the Rebbe was demanding very strongly how it is important to get involved, to see to it, to reach out to the youth and to do it, mitzvahs in general, and all of them is Koyim. And the Rebbe expressed himself that ultimately every youth will be reached. No youth will be taken away from Yiddishkeit. Everyone will return and get involved ultimately with Yiddishkeit. And with the Rebbe and with Torah and with mitzvah. The question only is, who is going to have this cross through whom will this be channeled? As the prophet uses the expression in the Megillah, Revach v'hatzala yamad la'yehud in what did Mordechai tell to Esther? He see his reign. We see that she didn't want to go to Achashverosh. He said the Yidden will have to be held in garden. Same the Rebbe applies, every Yid will ultimately have to come back to Yiddishkeit. The question only is, who will be Zeicha to get involved with more and more Yidden and bring them closer to Yiddishkeit? And here the Rebbe said, one may say, we are right now, after you said Kiflor, because Kiflor is a major threat. And Hafotz and Hamayona is Chutza, so one may say, he wants to be involved with the what? With the Mayim. What is there more important and more holier and more greater than being closely associated and involved with the Mayim, which is the source of Chassidus? And I can really demand from him that he should get involved with such petty things, getting involved with other Yidden and reaching out to other Yidden and seeing to it that other Yidden should observe Torah mitzvahs. Because he has more important things to do. He wants to be involved in learning Chassidus. This is why Mayim is a well. Chassidus is compared to a well. However, the Rebbe says this is the error of the person, and on the contrary, that's the one who has learned Chassidus properly, and later takes these thoughts which we have learned of Chassidus, and relates this to other Yidden, and not necessarily when we go out and relate it to another Yid who, in the meantime, is not learned yet, and not familiar with the terms we are learning in Chassidus, and with the Inyanim we are learning in Chassidus. We cannot relate it to him in the same OCS, in the same letters, in the same format we have learned this in Chassidus. But still, we can reach out to every Yid by explaining every Yid that he was created. This is something that everyone agrees that he was created by the Rebbe. And the Rebbe to create the person, the Talmud, you could mutter, just like the Rebbe said, is the same way he wants us to be. And therefore, if we will convince the Yid by explaining them the whole idea of what sin is, for example, and why all of Torah is compared to sin. Because film reflects the major idea. It reflects the idea how we are mistabed, our mayach and lay, our intellect and our heart, how we are dedicating it solely to the Rebbe. This is something, that is why we put on film alahoy. And this is why we put on film opposite our heart. So when this thought is explained to a youth, and when a youth realizes that this is not just a major mitzvah, this is not just a detailed mitzvah, this is a major mitzvah, because that is why the Gemara tells us that school of film can never tell us Torah Kula. Why film compared to all of Torah? Because film has within it this major idea. So when we convince the youth to properly begin putting on film, automatically it's mitzvah, there are a mitzvah, one mitzvah brings another mitzvah, and leads to another mitzvah, so you will be putting on, will be fulfilling the other mitzvahs as well. And through this, we will be able to get more and more Yidden closer to the Eibishter, and as a result, the Eibishter through Yidden will also be in the same way, as we know it works in a way of Yidah to Neged Yidah. So the Eibishter is Yidden from their side, live up to the standard of Sibud HaMayach Ta'alev, dedicating our mind, our intellect, and our emotions to the Eibishter. This brings about from the Eibishter Kaviyach the same idea as Sibud HaMayach Ta'alev from the Eibishter to Yidden. Here's a total dedication that the Eibishter takes the total, dedicates himself totally, takes the total interest in this particular Yid who is doing the same attitude to the Eibishter. Well, because when we're talking about Yidden and Torah are not the same, because even when the child, even before a child is born, the child is also learning Torah. As we know, the Gemara tells us in the Sefton Nideh, in the Agadite of the Sefton Nideh, that while a child is the Neyei Imai, Neyei Dolok al Oisei, there is a little lamp above the head of the child, and the lamp in Neyei say, Kol HaTorah Kula, and the child is taught the entire Torah. Rebbe says, for those who want to clap What Torah is learned with a child before the child is born? Is it Nigla the Torah only, or Chassidus is also taught to the child before the child is born? The Rebbe says if we look carefully, we will, first of all, this is an area which is discussed in the Chelek Agoda of Torah. Now, the Rebbe writes that the Agoda of Torah, Agoda in the Gemara, is a Chelek of Torah that has a cycle to community of Torah. So this is already told where, in that Chelek of Torah, which has a cycle to community of Torah. And here the Rebbe says, let us see what the Gemara tells us. The Gemara tells us that there is a lower Dolok al Hoysei. There is a candle on top of the head of the child. If we are to take this in, Al-Nigla is something which cannot be explained. Al-Nigla, halachically, we know that there are four major damages, and one of them is considered a fire. Fire is something which is very, which can cause damage. And here we say that before a child is born, on the head of the child, there is a nail dollar. If we are to take the in out the start. In other words, out the nigla is something which is very ununderstood and was putting the child and the mother in a very dangerous situation. However, if we take it in a cleaning situation, if we take it that this is a union out the speeder, that lower dollar al-Raisi is an union ruchni, something spiritual. And at that time, while the child is in the mother's womb, the child is taught all of Torah, so we must say that the child at that time is taught not only nigla the Torah, but as well Pnimi the Torah. In the theme the Rebbe made on Shas, Rebbe also mentioned how the end of Mishnah, not only the end of Gemara, but the end of Mishnah concludes with the word Solon. Hashem Yevorech es Amay Basolon. In part of Chazarah, how the Solon ends with a name, the beginning of Mishnah is also with a name, Nehemasa. The Rebbe also stressed that it's a Jewish custom that when using meat, one says to the other, Shalom Aleichem, and how does the other one respond, Aleichem Shalom? So we see that Shalom is something which is extremely important for you. As each time two even get together, what is the very first expression between these two people? Shalom. Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem Shalom. The other said it is, one met somebody, and this person, it seems like they're seeing him not seeing each other for a longer period of time, and the person does not give himself. As it says, I mean, personally knows the Jewish custom that when two people get together and didn't see each other for a long time, they have to greet each other Shalom. But the Gemara stresses that it's a great thing to one to greet another Shalom, especially one who beats the other one and comes before to say Shalom. The Gemara praises this person. The Rebbe criticized him how your person doesn't say no Shalom Aleichem. This person told them that he learned from Labadik. The city of Labadik. You see this way back. While we see that Labadik was still in the steppe of Labadik. And then it was customary that every 6 months or so he would travel home. So a few weeks they would come back to the yeshiva. Came back to the yeshiva, they were paying hundreds of buckets. He said if you would get involved in giving everyone Shalom, and being careful that when another bucket comes back, he gives him Shalom. And to give Shalom all the Bacharim, when he comes back, he said he would never get a chance to learn a word. He would be constantly giving Shalom to the Bacharim that are coming, and to giving Shalom to the Bacharim after he comes back from home. Therefore, he never got involved with the idea of giving Shalom Aleichem. So this, the Rebbe says, may be a calculation which this individual may have. However, the proper attitude for using is that when two Yidden always get together, they address each other, one says Shalom Aleichem, and the other one responds with an Aleichem Shalom. This is how Yidden have always been feeling this, and this is something which is based on the attitude of God. The Gemara, in Chazarah we find the same attitude, and the Gemara tells us the greatness of two Yidden giving Shalom one to another. So therefore we cannot underestimate the idea of saying Shalom Aleichem, or the other one responding Aleichem Shalom, because this is something which is of extreme importance, and it has something very meaningful within it. Farbrengen later the Rebbe went on, as usual, learning the Rashi, as well as commentary on the Zohar in this week's Seder. The commentary Zohar from the Rebbe's father. The Rebbe quoted a Zohar in this study. Where the Zohar talks about Rapchia. The famous Tana Rapchia. The Zohar tells us that when Rapchia came to Eretz Yisrael, he was so involved in learning Torah that when he got involved in Torah, his face began to shine like the sun. That's how Torah had an impact on Rapchia. Afterwards, the Zohar says that Rapchia was able to tell the people around him which one of them learned Torah Lishma for the sake of Torah, and which one learned Torah to learn Lishma. We know the Gemara tells us that Loilam Yashik Odom B'Torah Afilu to learn Lishma. It's Chazarah advisor, even if we learn Torah for any other intent, we shall do so as long as we learn Torah. But naturally, the highest level of one learning Torah is when he learns Torah without any other intentions, only for the sake of learning Torah. So, the Zohar says that Rapchia was able to recognize on the face of a person which one of them learned Torah Lishma and which one didn't. And the Zohar goes on to have his Torah. He was mistalel on the one that learned Lishma. He prayed for this person, as well as he prayed for the one who did not learn Torah Lishma yet. Obviously, for the one that learned Torah Lishma, he prayed for him. This person is a very outstanding person. The one who is as yet not learning Torah Lishma, and he prayed for him that he should reach to a level of learning Torah Lishma. This is what the Zohar says. But because who are we talking about? We're talking about a Tana Rapchia. Who was the Tana Rapchia? He was a very close disciple of Rebbe, Rabbi Nachman. And who was the author of the Vayeshev? Rapchia. Rapchia and his colleague, Vayeshev, they were the ones that edited the Vayeshev. Mother tells us that any Vayeshev which was not learned in the yeshiva of Rapchia and Rabbi Vayeshev does not have the validity of a Vayeshev. Vayeshev, Mishnah is agreed by all. After Mishnah came the stage of Vayeshev. Mishnah was edited by Rabbi Nachman of Yehuda HaNassi. After he closed Mishnah, it's still the time of the Tanoim. It wasn't the time of the Tanoim yet. It was before the era of the Gemara. So, Rapchia and his colleague, Rabbi Vayeshev, they were the ones that edited the Vayeshev. So obviously we're talking about someone who was real outstanding in learning, to such an extent that he was capable of editing the Vayeshev. Not only that, but Chazal tell us any Vayeshev which was not learned by Rapchia, the Rabbi Vayeshev does not have the validity of the Vayeshev. In another Gemara in Shabbos, we find about Rapchia. How great are the deeds of Rapchia? The Gemara tells us there that Rapchia and Raphanina had an argument. So Raphanina said that I can see to it that in case in case it will come to a point when Torah will be forgotten from you, Raphanina said, he will see to it through his koyach of simple, he was very sharp in learning, to see to it that Torah should not be forgotten. Rapchia told him. So Rapchia responded to him. I'm separated. Rapchia said, I will see to it that it should never come to a point that Torah should be forgotten from you. What did Rapchia do? The Gemara tells us very detailed. That Rapchia went out and got the Rapchia himself. Here the Rebbe says, here we got to notice carefully. We're talking about this great story of Rapchia. Rapchia had many disciples around him. No, he went himself, got these deer, slaughtered them. With the meat of the deer, he fed Yisraelim, he fed orphans. And then he went ahead and made parchment so that he would be able to write Torah and Mishnah on the parchment of these deer. He took these scrolls of parchment and began traveling from city to city. Wherever he found children who were not knowledgeable in the knowledge of Torah, he he made up to them all this was done by Ratzia himself. That he will teach them Hamishachum Tekera, he will teach them Chichasig and Mishnah, that in order can do things. What was Ratzia condition with these youngsters? He will teach them Torah, providing that after they know what he's going to teach them, they will share this knowledge with other children who as yet are not educated with Torah. And the Gemara refers to this, Hamagdelu Ma'aseh, how great are the deeds of Ratzia. Because it is to his vision and to his actions that Torah was not forgotten from the Jews. In those days there was no school system, obviously. No Chazarah was on the Torah like we have now. Because it came to a stage where throughout various villages and cities and towns, there was nobody around to teach Torah to little youngsters. So Ratzia, realizing the situation, showed a living example himself what he did to preserve Torah. And by doing this, the Gemara gives credit to Ratzia that it's thanks to him so that Torah was never forgotten from you. Not only like his college said, if Torah will be forgotten, he will live it up again, he will remind you of Torah. Ratzia was a step ahead. Ratzia saw to it that it could never come to a point that Torah could be forgotten. So these are the actions of Ratzia. Here the Zohar is talking about the same college Ratzia. So naturally, when we're talking about a person who is yet has not reached the level of learning Torah Lishma, you still have to teach him Torah. As the Rambam tells us, the Rambam is given some Mishnayos. The Rambam explains how the youngster begins learning Torah, he definitely does not learn Torah Lishma. The child learns Torah because he thinks he doesn't attend to that Torah, or for any other type of reward. As a person grows, he has various thoughts in his mind, various ideas of reward, that because of this he's learning Torah. However, the one who is learning Torah Lishma, naturally this person, the Rebbe says, him we're going to keep in his level, though Torah can be learned to learn Lishma as well. However, one who learns Torah Lishma, naturally, Torah is happier and better and more proper that it can be learned Torah Lishma. However, Ratzia, who took a total interest in everyone's learning Torah, as you find in the Gemara, which you just related, this Ratzia here, the Zohar tells us, was extremely appreciative to everyone that learned Torah, and therefore he prays for those that learn Torah Lishma, as well as for those that did not learn Torah Lishma, because Ratzia whole goal in life, what does Ratzia stand for? His whole idea was to bring Torah to as many people as possible. So when Ratzia taking it into life, and the Zohar tells us his own face looked like the light of the sun when he was learning Torah. And when he got encountered with people who were also learning Torah, Ratzia did not mind whether they learned Torah Lishma or they did not learn Torah Lishma as yet. As long as they learned Torah, Ratzia says to them. In the Farbrengen, the Rebbe also he said that while talking about his son, and talking about the nice Malava Malka, which is Malava Malka, sponsored by Nesek, so those sons were able to spread the idea of Nesek, of Meir Shabbos Kodesh, that as many his mothers and his daughters could light Shabbos candles. Last week's Malava Malka was a Malava Malka for the mitzvah for the idea of Paras HaMitzpacha. The Rebbe spoke today with the Farbrengen and combined both ideas together. And how essential both of them are together, and how one can really not be without the other. We find by Rivka, mainly we find that when Rivka came to the tent of Sarah, Chazal says that just like by Sarah, it was Meir Golik Me'erev Shabbos L'erev Shabbos, a candle lit. The candle that Sarah lit on Friday remained lit till the next Friday. And when Rivka came to the home of Abraham and married Sarah, she followed the footsteps of her mother-in-law Sarah. And the same happened by her as well. It was Meir Golik Me'erev Shabbos L'erev Shabbos. And the Rebbe asked, why only Me'erev Shabbos L'erev Shabbos? Why didn't the Meir remain constantly? And the Rebbe said no, because we are told that there's an idea of mile in the Kodesh. If you do so, we constantly have to keep on going higher and higher. So therefore, by mother, Sarah, as well as by Rivka, and later by the other Imai, it was Yor Galuk Me'eretz Shabbos L'Eretz Shabbos. The candle burned from one Friday to the other. However, when it came to the next Friday, she lit a new candle. She lifted herself to a higher Madrega Ruchiyat as well. So that is why it had to be a new candle, because she kept on going higher, Myra the Kodesh, higher, and she did it from week to week. What if I discuss, even for a young of Tahara, when one wants to deeply learn the halachas of Paris and its usually these halachas cannot be learned during the day when it's noisy and children are around and so forth. These halachas have to be learned in the evening. In the evening, we have to come on to Neiros. Without Neiros, you can't properly learn the halachas. As well, the observance of Paris and its at times requires the union of the duke, of women touching themselves. And all this cannot be done unless there's a union of Neiros. So we see how the idea of Neiros and the union of Paris and its which is the union, the whole idea, the love and the persecution, the expression, the Zarakti Aleichem Mayim Teherem. As the person says, I will pour upon you pure water. It reflects the idea of mitzvah, the idea of Paris and its how this union, as well as the union of Neiros, go hand in hand, that both of these unions go together. Hanukkah, the Rebbe says, in the day of Hanukkah we have a major machlekes between the Shammai and the Killer. Very famous machlekes, how are we to observe the lighting of the Hanukkah candle? Naturally, we follow the opinion of the Killer. The Killer claims that we start with 1, 2, 3, until we finally reach 8. The Shammai claim the opposite. The Shammai claim that we start with 8, and we go down from 8 until on the first day, on the last day, on the last day it is that we light the candle. The Gemara explains the differences between the Shammai and the Torah. The Gemara uses the following explanation. The Gemara uses 2 interpretations for the Shammai and 2 interpretations as well for the Torah. The text is Shabbos that's the following on the day. The Shammai holds, according to one, to negate Yomim HaNisnosim. We spend on as many days you still have to observe. And that is why on the first day, there are still 8 days of Hanukkah to observe. That is according to the Shammai, 8 standards. According to the Torah, it's to negate Yomim HaYesim, to negate the days that are going by. But we are already observed. So far we only observed 1 day, Thursday. That's why we like 1 candle. The second day we're already observing 3 days, we like 2 candles. Chadoma, another man, the Oman Gemara says, completely different reasoning for the Shammai. Hanukkah the Shammai to make it Korei HaChad. But in Sukkot, when they usually were matching korbanos to the Beis HaMikdash, they started with more and went down. So that is why we follow the same idea in Hanukkah. Hanukkah the Torah, what is the reason of the Torah? Mayim the Kodesh, the Lerim Meridim. In tradition, we always go higher and not lower. Therefore, being that we start with 1, we go higher to 2, and so forth until we finally reach 6. Obviously, the Rebbe says this is an interpretation, 2 reasons for the Shammai and 2 reasons for the Torah. Every reason in Torah has to have a reflection the Rebbe says in Halacha Lamaita. What could be the difference in Halacha according to each relation? So what the Rebbe is asking, where do we find the Halacha difference whether they still use, let's take this over for example, it's to never Yomim HaNisnosim, to never Yomim HaYosim, or they still using it, Myron the Kodesh Lerim. What difference is it? In that theology, you know that tonight we live 2 standards according to this thing. So what difference is it? Whether it's Myron the Kodesh Lerim, or the different thing that we observe as the many days we already have. The Rebbe said that there could be a halachic difference. For example, let us take, for example, the 3rd day Hanukkah. And one is in a situation where he only had 2 liquids. So the Rebbe does not have enough oil, he does not have enough butter with the guiding on Timothy. Because it's the way that is, and if you will light on the 3rd night of Hanukkah only one of his candles,
and not to, then he will be a Meirah de Kodesh, and he will go down in Kedusha. And this is something which the Torah prohibits. So here we have Nafkemina lahalacha lemaisa, according to which reason of Beis Hillel is acceptable. This is the question: which difference of Beis Hillel is the main reason of Beis Hillel? I mean, something which nowadays hopefully we don't come into such type of a situation. The only thing the Rebbe was looking to find an afkemina lahalacha, a halachic difference between these opinions, and this is how we portrayed it in such type of a case. Otherwise, we cannot find an afkemina lahalacha between these various reasons which are given to explain the opinion of Beis Hillel. In the Geya de Rashi in this week's Chazarah, the Rebbe explained two inyanim in Parshas Vayeshev. The Rebbe stressed early in the Farbrengen, every Chazarah has its name. Some Chazarahs have two words, some have a name only that consists of one word. When we're talking about Parshas Vayeshev, it's only this one word which is the title to the Chazarah. What does Vayeshev mean? Settled. Vayeshev Yankov, and Yankov settled. This, the Rebbe says, reflects the idea also of Shalom. Once settles, he's usually settled in a peaceful manner. So the hemshech to what we spoke about earlier, how the idea of Chanukah stands for Shalom, and the whole idea of Torah stands for Shalom. And Torah concludes, Mishnah concludes with the concept of Shalom. Same thing, this week's Chazarah also stands for the concept of Shalom, his Yashvus, when one settles in a very peaceful way. The Negei de Rashi in this week's Chazarah, the Rebbe stressed two inyanim. Firstly, as we find in Kapitel Lamed Zayin, the beginning of the Chazarah, after Sheni, Kapitel Lamed Zayin, Posik Tezvav. Yaakov sent his son Yosef to look for the Shvatim. Yosef went on this mission, though he knew that he wasn't too beloved by his brothers. Vayimtze'ehu ish, he was found by a man. Rashi quotes the word Vayimtze'ehu ish, he was found by a man. And Rashi tells us, who is this man? Gabriel, the angel Gabriel. The Rashi doesn't say the angel, Rashi just says Gabriel. Shenema, Rashi finds a pasuk in Daniel, the Ha'ish Gabriel. We find in Daniel that Gabriel, the Malach, can have a title of Ish. Rebbe asks, first of all, why does Rashi have to quote the word Vayimtze'ehu? He was found by Ish. All Rashi is out to do here is to tell us who this Ish is. So Rashi should just quote the word Ish and tell us that Ish means Gabriel. Furthermore, if we look into the Psukim carefully, in Pasuk Tesvav, we find Vayimtze'ehu Ish. Once the word Ish. The latter part of the Pasuk, Vayishalehu Ha'ish. The Ish asked him, Matevatesh, what do you want? We go down to Pasuk Yud Zayin, the Pasuk uses the expression again, Vayona Ha'ish. Pasuk uses 3 times the expression Ish. Obviously, we're talking about the same Ish. Why did the Pasuk have to repeat itself again and again with the expression Ish? In this week's Chazarah, where we find when Tamar gave birth, so the Pasuk uses the expression Yad 4 times before Revi. So there Rashi momentarily coming Arba Yodes Ktubis Khan. Why is it mentioned 4 times here the word Yad? Keneged Arba Charonim Shemo'al Ochon Sheyotza Minen. So Rashi immediately finds the reason why the word Yad is mentioned 4 times. The same thing that other areas in other Psukim and other Chazarahs, Wherever a word is repeated more than usual, Rashi comments on it. Here, within these few psukim, the word ish is stressed 3 times, and Rashi doesn't comment anything about it. Why? The Rebbe explains as follows. Yosef was looking for his brother. So when somebody gets lost, the expression in Yiddish is when somebody blunders and he's looking for somebody, so the attitude of the person is, the one who's lost, he's seeking to find the person who should help him and give him assistance and guide him out of his being lost and guide him into the proper track. Here, Yosef got lost. He reached the camp. He got lost. But Yinta'edu, and the person had to find him. Not he looked for a person. The person came to him. Obviously strange. Yosef is looking for his brother. He cannot find them. So Yosef should seek after a person to ask him, did you see the group of brothers around here in this area that were here before? Maybe you know where they are now. So Rashi is bothered right away with Yosef's attitude. Why is it that it's just as how the 5-year-old is learning their pshat. Why is it that the person had to address himself to Yosef? Yosef saw a person, he immediately should have gone over to the person. Yosef was lost, right? So he should have gone over to the person. Perhaps you can help me find my brother. So Yosef did not do that. However, the person had to come over to him. So that is why Rashi comments. Who was this person that headed himself and didn't wait for Yosef to come to him, but immediately went over to Yosef? Who was this? Who was this ish? This ish was Gabriel. So Rashi as well is troubled with the word Vayimta'eyu as well. So that's why Rashi has to quote Vayimta'eyu and interpret that Gabriel. Gabriel comes over to Yosef, the Rebbe continues. Yosef finds himself in the presence of a malach. Yosef should have walked himself completely. So we see now, Yosef is responding. So Yosef is telling him, we see Yosef is pretty calm. Normally when somebody has such an encounter with a malach, he gets what he was saying in Yiddish, the tumult. He gets a little bit, gets nervous. A malach ain't playing it. The Pasuk tells us no. Rashi keeps on stressing, here Gabriel kept himself in the format of an ish. And that's why, as we find elsewhere, is Gabriel. So, Gabriel kept himself like an ish. Yosef was calm enough to relate all of his problems to Gabriel. And that is why Gabriel responded back to him. He asked him, what are you looking for? He told him he's looking for his brother. So the Ish could have told him 2 things. The Ish could have either told him they went to Dayton, and that's it. No. Being that it was Gabriel, so Gabriel wanted to give Yosef proper guidance. So he told him nothing, he said. And as Rashi comments, what does nothing mean? They have traveled from here. They have traveled themselves away from brotherhood. They don't have a feeling of brotherhood toward you anymore. To such an extent that not only are they keeping this within themselves, Gabriel says, I heard them talk. I heard them say, and usually saying reflects that what's within a person, and it shows that the person is really aggressive on it. And I heard them say, Nelcha Deisayna. And what does Nelcha Deisayna mean? They will go to Daisan, but it doesn't just mean they will go to Daisan, but as Rashi said, they are going to look for various means and tricks to create problems for their brother, for Yosef. So really, this is gave complete guidance here to Yosef. Here the Rebbe says, we know that in Malach Yosef says Silchas. One malach does not do more than one thing. However, we find when the malachim came to Avraham Avinu, and so we find that the same malach that came to heal Avraham, this same malach went to rescue Lot. Why? Because one malach does not do 2 shlichas applies when there are different types, various types of missions. However, when the mission is the same same type of a mission, then the same malach could fulfill it. See, that God was a mission of rescue. He came to bring rescue, healing, and a refuah to Abraham, and he came to rescue life. It's the same type of an idea. From the Melech, it was able to be done by the same malach. The same thing here. Gabriel fulfilled several missions. He responded to Yosef right away. Not only did he respond to him, but he told him where the brothers went to. Not only did he tell them where the brothers are, but he told them what type of mood they are in and what type of feeling they have towards Yosef. So he told them after several things, but all these things are along the same line. So that is why it was the same malach, the same Gabriel that was able to fulfill the same pleasure. This is one meaning of this week's Chazarah. Another meaning of this week's Chazarah is all the way at the end of the Chazarah in today's passage. In today's passage, the Chazarah concludes, "V'loizocha Saramaskim as Yosef, the Saramaskim did not remember Yosef al Yishtechehu, he forgot on him." Why did he forget him? The Rashi's comment, being that Yosef depended himself on the Saramaskim, he hoped that the Saramaskim, after explaining the dream so intelligently, the Saramaskim will help him, and Yosef couldn't have done so. Yosef was for 2 extra years in prison. So let's Rashi in this respect. And Rashi quotes the passage, Sinema, Ashrei HaGever Asher Tom B'Hashem Mesachel. Praise is the person who relies fully in Hashem. V'lo yifona el rehavim, v'lo yibotach al hamitzrayim hatchulim rahad. And it does not rely on the Mitzrayim who are referred to as rahad. So Rashi, in other words, is condemning here the attitude of Yosef. But Yosef did something wrong, and for this wrong thing that he did, he was for 2 extra years in prison. If we look back to Pasuk Aleph of this very same kapitel, Kapitel Mem, Pasuk Aleph, Achar HaDvarim Ha'elet was there to be sinned, and the Saramaskim and the Saraosa have sinned. What does Rashi say? What happened? Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu make them sin? So Rashi says 2 things. First of all, that people should get their attention off Yosef and to start talking about these 2 people who have sinned. And another reason, the oath is something more than that. That it is become easier for the Sabbath through them. In other words, being that they are being put into the same prison as who was Yosef. Yosef will acquaint himself with the Saramaskim and the Saraosa. So they will be able to help Yosef. What's going on? These 2 Rashis contradict each other. Here Rashi is telling us, the child is learning, these chickens get completely confused. Here Rashi is telling us that why was Yosef and the Saramaskim and the Saraosa put into the same prison cell so that they should get acquainted and that the Saramaskim and Saraosa should be able to do Harvacha, should be able to help with the Sabbath. At the very end, the 23 Sukkim later, Rashi is criticizing Yosef's attitude. That why was Yosef for 2 extra years in prison? Because Yosef relied on the Saramaskim and Saraosa. The obvious is very contradictory. Let me explain clearly on it. What Rashi is saying here was, it should come harvacha l'tzadik al yedayim. Naturally, yeah, the Rebbe spoke about it in a temporary way. He says, and the Rebbe later just holding in how Rashi Shachar Yisrael, we all can now have problems with Mitzrayim. And here the Rebbe again condemns very much the Camp David peace treaty. The Rebbe spoke out again very strongly in today's Farbrengen, as well as in the official Farbrengen, the investigating the massacre in Lebanon. The Rebbe said it's something which is completely not understood. There's no logic how Yidden can go ahead and do a thing like that. It's known very well who did this massacre. It was done by those who wanted to, who felt that they had to do this to the terrorists because the terrorists have been doing it to them for many, many years, and have been killing out thousands and thousands of them. The Rebbe says, and perhaps even out the halacha, dinim, there are dinim which exist by goyim. And perhaps even according to the halachas which should exist by goyim, there may even be room for it. The Rebbe says it's only here in the United States where the death penalty was in recent years removed. However, by goyim there exists, Hilchos goyim, there exists the concept of a death penalty. And if it was a terrorist who for that many years has killed so many of the Christians in Lebanon, then the Christians in Lebanon definitely had a feeling of revenge, of something which can be understood and can be explained rationally what this whole massacre was all about. And to go ahead and involve Yidden and create this whole investigation, the Rebbe spoke about the Sikha at length, and today's Farbrengen as well, is a very great error, and it's something which cannot be explained, the great mistake which Yidden are doing by creating this type of an investigation team. As well as the same mistake which was done in the Camp David peace treaty, which is something where Yidden gave away a tremendous amount, and got back nothing. And to such an extent that it's through these boundaries, and the boundaries now with Egypt are not the same boundaries which we had before the peace treaty. The boundaries now are much closer ones. And through these boundaries, there are terrorists which are crossing these boundaries after the peace treaty and coming into Eretz Yisrael, and as the Rebbe stressed in the Chazarah Farbrengen, it is the Israeli press who is putting the censor on their news and does not let these stories be printed and being publicized. How terrorists are constantly crossing through the Egyptian border and coming into Eretz Yisrael, but ultimately these stories are found out and we know about it, and it's something which is again a tremendous error, the entire peace treaty. And here the Rebbe said that in Yidden are in Galus, Yidden also have to come on to Goyim. However, there are two types of attitudes. There is an idea of Shetove Harvacha V'Tzadik HaYodeh. Yidden in Galus, out the Torah. There are various assistance which Yidden have to get through Goyim. Eretz Yisrael has to come on to the United States for various assistance, whether it's economic help or it's a religious type of help. And this is something which Al Torah has an understanding, being that we are now in Galus, we have to come on to Goyim that Goyim can help. However, to bring ourselves into a position of relying on Goyim and not doing nothing ourselves and not having any faith, any emunah ourselves, this has to come. The first thing Rashi says is that the Saramaskim and the Saraisim were put into the same prison cell in order that they should make it easier for Yosef. However, this does not mean that Yosef should take away his protection from the Rebbe. What Yosef did wrong was Kola by Yosef. Rashi uses a different expression. Rashi uses the expression Kola. What does Kola mean? Kola means he was dependent on them. And this was Yosef's error. When Yosef HaKadosh got dependent on Goyim, on the Saramaskim and the Saraitim, this is something which he never should have done. And that is why the Pasuk, Rashi quotes the Pasuk, Ashrei HaGever, praises the person as a Som Hashem Nesachel, that puts all his faith in the Eibishter, and does not turn to anyone else. And what Yosef did was, he turned to Rahavim, he turned to the Mitzvah. The attitude has to be, as the first half of the Pasuk, praise is the one who puts all his hope, all of his mitzvahs in Hashem. And this is what Yosef should have done. However, on a side way, Derech Agav, to also believe that the Saramaskim and Saraisim can be instrumental in helping him, and can bring Harvacha, can make it easier on him, definitely, by all means, there's nothing wrong in that. However, when Yosef put his dependence onto the Saramaskim and Saraisim, Kala Yosef, Kala by Yosef was Zechoi. This brought to a position that Yosef, the Rebbe to punish Yosef to such an extent that Yosef had to remain for 2 more years in prison. Because the attitude of the Yid has to be one of Ashrei HaGever, praises the person after some Hashem B'Sachar that puts his hope and his eyes and his assistance only in him, only in the Rebbe. The Rebbe concluded again the Farbrengen with a strong reminder to do in all of the Mitzvahs, and particularly now that we're in Hanukkah, and those that did not have the chance to do a Mitzvah Hanukkah before Hanukkah, during the Yom Tov, it is yet easier to do in the Mitzvah, and there are many people who have yet the message of Hanukkah has not reached them. So now that we are in the end of Hanukkah, it's an appropriate time to reach out to all Yidden and bring them the message and the idea of Hanukkah. The Rebbe referred to the Chazal, what Chazal tell us, and it's quoted in many Rishonim, that the third Beis HaMikdash will not even have to be built. It is already built. It is Omed Lamayla. It's completely erected Lamayla. And all that it's waiting for is for the proper time when the Rebbe says to take this Beis HaMikdash as it stands. It already stands complete with all of its accessories and with all of the things that have to be put into it. And the Rebbe says to just take this Beis HaMikdash and bring it down into this world immediately. This is Hanukkah.